Remember they used to get the beep on your radio or on your, I think it was saying this is a test, or on your television, because
It still does.
Does it?
No.
I don't watch TV, so I don't
Yeah, I
know.
didn't watch.
My phone comes on and says there's a storm warning, but every Wednesday at noon, today at noon, you will hear the alarms go off,
I can certainly hear that.
which they're just testing them. And that was what was happening. But I remember that because we did that when I was a kid growing up, because they were afraid of atomic war.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And everybody had to go, remember having to go and sit in a particular place.
Yes.
Yeah, like that was going to save you from that.
Put your head under the desk.
Well, yeah, put your head under the table and this sort of stuff. But we didn't know any better,
No.
But at least it was a warning.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what he's talking about, the testing and the warning. But I remember those days, and I remember the thing screaming and saying, this is a test, this is a test. And for 30 seconds or ever how long it went, I forgot now. But that was what we do. And today we still have alarms. I'm sure that when the weather gets bad, all of us, our ears perk up because we want to hear if the tornado sirens go off.
Oh, yeah.
And when we hear those, we sort of, it cause the hair on the back of our neck to stand up, and we get a little panicky and all that.
London.
But I like what he said in his first question was, what's the hardest test you've ever taken?
CPA exam.
CPA exam, okay.
Mine was to let my children, I don't know how to say it, not get in trouble, but
Oh.
You mean let
I
them?
watched them, and I couldn't do nothing about it.
Well, in other words, you gave them a little bit of freedom to make choices. And I think we've all been there. And I think we've all been apprehensive of just how it was going to go.
You try to tell them, do it this way, but they want to learn their way. They want to learn the hard way. I said.
Well, and that's true. It's sort of like we all have to learn to hit our finger with a hammer to know that it hurts, type things. We have to do that. But that was one of the questions. Somebody else, yours was CPA exam, yours was getting your children to take out.
Well, you hear about praying to turn some problem over to God.
Yeah.
That's really hard.
In other words, turning the problem over to God says what if it's a hard problem for us to do?
Let it go.
It's hard to release it.
Yeah.
It's hard not to overthink it.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, okay, Lord, this is yours. I'm out of here.
You're in charge.
We can't, it's just in our nature to worry about certain things. Do you lie awake at night when you know you got to do something tomorrow and you want to make sure that you have all the ducks in a row, all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed? And you go to bed at night and that's still in your mind, all right? I've learned to do one thing to get that out of my mind. One of my favorite jazz pianists is B.G. Adair. And for me to go get that out of my mind, I put B.G. on playing. And listening to her play the jazz piano, all of a sudden those things just sort of float away. And it's a comfort to know that. But I have to do that to get my mind off of it. The same thing happens when I'm doing studies or doing writings. I play things like Bill Mann singing, Lord, when, comfort me and this sort of stuff. We have to have that. We have to get something. But it is hard to turn a problem over to God and that sort of thing. But, he talks about tests that you've taken causing panic.
Yeah.
I laughed when he said having sweaty palms. I wasn't sure of that when I had my orals. When I finally had one professor that threw his pencil down, Dr. Lee, I can still see him, and told me with a few explicits, I didn't know anything about the periodic chart. Mm. And I said, Dr. Lee, I hadn't looked at a periodic chart since I was a freshman in college. He was asking me how many electrodes are on the outer ring of such and such element, And I'm saying he was a biochemist, all right. And he would start lecturing and writing on the board, walking in class, start writing on the board, and kept talking. And he was talking while he was writing on the board. And he would go around this board, and when the bell rung, he would put his chalk down and turn around and walk out.
One of Dr. Leslie told physical science. A lecture physical science class. That was the dumbest thing I think I've ever seen in my life.
Didn't learn much.
But yeah, so I would always think of Dr. Lee's exams. I would break out in a cold sweat, even though I knew it, even though I could write the citric acid cycle without even hesitating. I was never sure exactly if I got it just right. In fact, I was almost like he was talking about when their team got together and their team failed. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they all thought we all can do well together, but you see, they have to have a leader. Mm-hmm. The Navy SEALs has a SEAL team, but that SEAL team has a leader. All right. The church has to have a leader. I mean, unfortunately for you, it's me. But the fact being is, it has to have that. Team doesn't spell with an I. All right, and so that was where I was looking at it. But but I laughed what he said though. He had a true statement here. God tricked me into full-time ministry. Yeah. And all I could say was, amen.
I thought of you immediately when I read that. I mean, you told us so many times how you fought it for
I looked and Tom was talking to me, but I said, Tom's only using God's voice, he's mouthpiece. But so I could identify with that part, and I thought about that. But what was the easiest test you ever had?
I couldn't think of any easy tests.
I have test anxiety.
Test anxiety.
Yeah,
even as many as you've taken, you still have it.
Yes, and the first test that really mattered to me was my dad. I was going to take my driver's test, the written part. And he said, I don't know why I'm taking you up there. It's just a waste of time. You're going to fail thing anyway. And
that was encouraging.
Well, I asked him about it. He was in his 50s when I asked him about it. And I said, why did you do that? And he said, well, I thought you were like me, that if I challenged you like that, you would try even harder. He never understood me his whole entire life. He never understood a thing about me or what. And my brother would have done that. My brother was the kind of kid that if you challenged him at something, he would do it.
If it hair lipped the booger man.
Yes, he was going to do it, but not me. You tell me I'm going to fail, I'll believe you.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of, I think thinking back on this, though, is like Linda says about getting her children to step out. Have you ever had your children, did you wonder at home, they were just really not easy to get along with?
Oh, yeah.
But yet you would have people out in the public come and tell you, your children are the nicest children. And you think, my kid? You're talking about yeah. And so I was looking at this and I'm thinking, that's life, and here you look at this. And I sort of laughed. He dated himself when he wrote it here. When he talked about the fact that he went into the area where everybody was sitting around and a person called him over and says, do you have any jeans? And he had on yellow and green plaid pants. Do you think that dates him?
I think it probably does, and they still do things like that.
So when you look at that, but you got to realize what was in all of this is that the third part of any testing that Moses was putting. As a matter of fact, I'm preaching this Sunday on standing in the gap. And that's what Moses was. And that's what inspired me to look and write in that direction. Don't look at the front page of the bulletin when you get it Sunday morning, because you will not be able to read the words that are across the bottom of the picture, all right? And you're going to look at it and try to read them, and you're going to say, what is this written in?
My eyes.
I have a feeling it's written in Irish.
Brogue? Might be.
When you look at it, it says such words as S-T-A-I-D. That's where Moses was. That was their word for staying in. But when you read the rest of it, you're going to look at it. Because, there is a way of reading today. The words do not have to be spelled correctly, as long as the first and last letter are the right. Mm-hmm. And you can read the whole paragraph.
Yes.
But this is not when you look at
Not
that.
that. No, you can't read Irish if it
No,
is
you
Irish.
can't. I presume it is. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know, but anyway.
Well, we read Frankenstein, and that was the hardest book I have ever read because the person wrote in the way that people spoke in England in what was it, 18 whatever it
Early
was when
English,
she
yeah.
wrote it. That book drove me nuts. I was having to look up what does that mean? What is she trying to say?
Well, and you know, that's true. And there's a lot of things like that. As a matter of fact, how many times when you were in school studying, you had to read the assignment several times before it's really started making sense?
Every time.
It's the same way it is. It's the same way as with the Bible. Now, the thing I like about it is I've printed a lot of your biblical scriptures from the English Standard Version or from the New Living Version or translation because it's more what we are. When you and I pick up the King James, the old King James, it's in Old English, and I want everybody to understand. Paul did not speak in Old English; he spoke in Greek, and so
I really don't want to hear
and
that.
that really would have caused your readings a hard time.
Yeah.
I remember taking Greek and Latin and Hebrew, and I try to forget taking Hebrew. It was so hard. I mean, it was just something else. But anyway, I can figure it out, but I have trouble reading it because it reads totally reverse from us.
Well, what's the saying? It's Greek to me.
It's
I
all
mean,
Greek
there's a
to me,
reason for
yeah.
that.
And that's correct. So what you're looking at, you know, here you want to find out. We're looking at where they failed as a team because they didn't have a leader, and you got to realize that you can't have a team and have a mutual admiration society. Somebody's got to be the leader. Somebody's got to tell how it goes. And here was Generation Rest was getting ready to go in, and Moses was having to stand in the gap for them. And this is what God was having Moses there for. Because how many of you came from Arkansas? You didn't move here from somewhere else.
Born and reared.
But you moved out of here and went to California. It was a new world.
I went to Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. Well, that's even another one. When Joy and I moved here, when we crossed into Arkansas, it was a new world for us. Okay? I mean, we had to learn to speak Arkanese, right?
Yeah.
We had to. Every place was unfamiliar. The only thing we knew about when we moved to Arkansas was Central High. And the only reason we knew that was the 1957 crisis that we had here, and everybody knew it. But she wound up at Central for 11 years after that. But anyway, we were unfamiliar with the people because the people from Southern Louisiana and people from Arkansas, we're all Americans, but we're different.
Absolutely.
Try California.
And I've been to the lands of there.
Esther would say, I can't understand what she's saying.
I had to fly into Orange County, which is where I answered in Irvine, and it was a different world. But I stepped off the plane in LAX and had to take a hopper over to John Wayne and go from there. It was a different world. It was, and I found that out in all my travels. But it's sort of like Joy and I love to go to Maine. But Maine was a totally different world and a different language.
Yeah.
The Maine people, you ask them, you lived here all your life? And they say, not yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
And they said, where does this road go? It doesn't go anywhere. It stays right there. The groups would go with us to Sager Brown. We go to Sager Brown. And they would say, well, as soon as we cross the Louisiana line, your voice changes. You start talking like that, come yourself up onto me, huh? Yeah, and so, but that's the differences. And think what was happening to the Generation Rest.
Yeah.
I mean, they were walking into something they knew nothing about. As a matter of fact, Canaan had 9 enemies for them there. We still have enemies for them today, don't we? But anyway, so and it was a totally different faith system. It was a totally different system. Now, the nice thing about all of us is we transfer back and forth from across the United States. Our faith systems pretty much stay as they are. In other words, we didn't have to change that. But there were, and I I don't know that I've run into it here, but I've run into it in other places, is false religions. Now, see, they were getting into a religious phase that they knew nothing about. All they knew was their Jewish faith, period, Hebrew. That was it. They didn't know what the Anakites had or whatever they were doing, because they had multiple gods. They had all these little gods, and so they were looking at it. So Moses was trying to say, hey, you folks are going to be at risk. You've got to know this. You're at risk. You're going to have temptations. Because when you went to California, did you not tempted to try their cuisine? Like going to southern Louisiana, you want to try the Cajun cuisine.
Somewhat.
You're tempted. You do what?
Some of it was really hot.
Hot. Well, that's good. It can't get too hot. Well, it can't do. It can pop. It can pop the wax. It can pop the wax out of your ears at times. But anyway, they were getting ready to see false beliefs that they didn't know. They didn't have any idea, and they were innocent. I mean, it would be like you warned about your children, okay, and you just turning them loose in the streets. That's what was happening to them. Yeah. But Moses was standing in the gap for God, saying those things to him. And so we're looking at, it's no different in our lives today. It's still that way. And when we look at it, and so, there's false teachings going on. I remember there used to be a guy on television that would do all these things for God, and he was praying, and he says, love God and send me the money.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I was thinking, wait a minute. That's not what God said to do. But he obviously did quite well. People sent him a lot of money.
They did.
But that was where it is. But you have that, and you have all of these. You were talking earlier about, you ever dream about your test the next day?
Absolutely.
All night, and so you have those dreams that, but they should not design or guide our decision making. That's one of the areas that we need to look. And I was looking at that Deuteronomy, the 13th chapter, the first through the third verse, that he quotes there. And it's an interesting thing about this. He knew these temptations were going to plague this generation. And so Moses is saying to them, if a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder comes true, concerning which he spoke to you, saying, let us go after other gods who you have not known. See, in other words, this is a new world for you. You don't know them. And so, and sort of like some people that wouldn't know how they even cook a crawfish and fix it like we fix it in southern Louisiana. They probably wouldn't touch it. Because they would think it's mud putties, so and you would look at that. And let us serve them. In other words, if it sounds beautiful, you want to get involved with it, but then you need to really think, is what he was trying to say. Because he said, in all of this, God is testing you to find out if you love the Lord your God with all your heart. And it's the same today when you think of that. You see, there are attractive leaders in our world today that are not led by God. And that's what Moses is saying to them, is he's standing there in the gap between them. They haven't wet their sandals in the Jordan River yet, but no sooner than they get out of it, and as he said, they become dry, they're going to be in a new world. And so that's where we are, and they're crossing into the promised land. But Moses, he was warning the Israelites, this generation rest, against false prophets that are there. And he's warning us even today as we look at it. There's still those out there that are doing it. I get stuff on emails from people that I look at them and I go, what am I getting this for? And I look into them and I start reading it. And I got one that sounded pretty good until I looked and said, what is our belief? And when I started reading their belief, I said, wait a minute. You're telling me about God, but your belief is telling me something else. What do we believe? And so I went online and deleted it totally out of my system. I didn't want that, and I stay awake to that one coming in. Where they got my email, I don't know.
Oh, it's easy.
It's like you said, it's easy. As a matter of fact, I clear out my spams every day, and I will have as many as 300 spams. But it's real interesting. It only occurs on one of my email
Oh,
addresses.
yeah, they haven't found the other one.
They haven't found the other one yet, and I hope and pray they never do. All right, but it's there. So what I'm saying is, what Moses was saying to him, these new ideas from inspiring people may sound good, but we must judge them by whether or not they are consistent with God's word. And when people claim that they are, then you and I have to look at them in this word. Are they telling the truth? We have to stop and think about it. At times, I don't feel smart enough to know if they are. Have you felt that way?
Mm-hmm.
I have to do more digging to see what it is. And the other one is their focus on God, or is it look at me? It's sort of like the old boy says, watch my footwork while I'm dancing, so you can't see what my hands are doing. All right, and so that's where we are. But is it there? Is it focus on God? Are their words consistent with what you and I already know to be true? And that's the question we have to ask ourselves. And that's what Moses was saying to these generation rest. They're entering into a world they have no idea what it's like. Have you ever been there?
Yes.
Have you ever gotten off a plane in a foreign country and have no idea what it's really like in that country? Yeah, and that's where they were, I mean, you look at it, it looks okay, but when you get out into the country, it's not like what it was like there at the airport that you landed in. It's, it sort of moves and makes transitions. And so, matter of fact, Joy and I and her sisters were on a cruise one time and went into a city and it had a wall around it. And I looked over the wall and it was nothing out there. And the wall, signs, warnings in this city, don't go beyond the wall.
Across the wall.
Well, I'm thinking, whoa, wait a minute, But I looked at it and I said, well, the first thing I don't want to go there because it's got snakes in there.
No, probably.
It's got rattlesnakes in it, and I don't want to go in there. So we have that. But he also says, if you and I, some people speak the truth while directing you and me toward God, but others speak persuasively while directing you and I toward themselves. It's even possible to say the right words, but still lead people in the wrong direction. We can do that without realizing it. You see, God is not against new ideas. Just look around you and think what's transpired since Paul and all the Gospels were written. Think about what's transpired because God was in for new things. As a matter of fact, if you saw one of my articles, the fact is Jesus formed a new temple. Just like feeding the 5,000. That was a new temple. That wasn't a building, that was a temple. Or, waking up, they woke Jesus up in the stern of the boat because it was storming, and that was a new temple. All of it, they thought they had to be inside. He says, you don't have to be there. And one of the nice things that we always enjoyed about going camping, and Joe and I've been on camping trips where we'd have 30 people in the campsite. Well, one of our little friends, one of the girls in the group, always wanted to sing, what was the song? Beulah Land? Or Bringing in the Sheaves. Anyway, she would always get us we had to have time for church, even in the wilderness. And see, you can worship. How many have been to Brush Arbor Days? That's out, that wasn't a temple. So what we're looking at is what we have to be careful. False prophets are still around today, but the wise people will carefully test.
I used to worry a lot about that.
Yeah.
Didn't think I knew enough.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying to all of us right now. Do we doubt ourselves of knowing enough to see if they are telling the truth, God's truth or not? And that's why we study. That's why we come to church, and that's why we look at and worship in the things that we do. But I wanted us to think about that a bit and go from there. I think the major statement he made on the other page was he wanted them to be prepared to enter the promised land. Nobody told Joe and I that when we came to Arkansas. We came to Arkansas. Did you realize in Arkansas we had one stretch of 4-lane highways in 1962, and you folks called it the New Benton Highway. And it was 4 lanes. Yeah. And I said to Joyce Irwin one time, why did they only build 4 lanes? And she said, they didn't want to have white flight.
That's what they said.
And I said, Joyce, you gotta be kidding me. She says, no.
We got it.
I said, it didn't work.
No, it didn't work.
And now what is it, 6 lanes?
All Bryant.
Yeah, and you know, we've seen people, Cabot is now how big?
Oh my gosh.
You know, Bryant is how large?
Yeah.
Conway is now over
Yeah.
60,000 people. I mean, and you look at, Joy and I get to drive this way. Do you realize that when we came out of this morning, there was 3 lanes, bumper to bumper, headed into Little Rock on 430. Where were they coming from? Bryant, Benton,
Yeah.
Haskell. They live so far out, and now we're able to do it. All right. What would you think the population of Little Rock would be at noon on a Wednesday?
Right. Double what they say on the signs.
Yeah, I mean, you got people coming in all directions and all that. And so what he wanted to do is be prepared for that. Joy and I were innocent enough not to worry about being prepared. We were just going where we were told we were supposed to be going. And we came here, all right? And and it was a place that we fell in love with. We never wanted to go anywhere else. We go travel, but we don't want to live there. I had a corporation that I worked for that says we would like for you to look at Salt Lake City. Well, at that time, Salt Lake City didn't even have a Methodist church.
I'm sure.
And it was there to open a facility. And I said, no. And my friend says, you realize you've turned them down 3 times. They're not going to like this.
You know, when the new coach came to Arkansas, he didn't commit until he found out that was the Catholic church.
St. John's Church is there.
Because he thought it was the wilderness, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
coming from where he was in Kentucky,
Yeah.
Joy and I have been there, and we know what that's like. But I'm amazed that he was Catholic, and he wanted to make sure there was a Catholic
I'm
church.
glad.
It's the Catholic church that our kids
That's
belong
right.
to when they live there, and friends of ours that live there. As a matter of fact, he's not bad off because the former baseball coach for the university, Norm DeBryan, was one of the deacons in that church. So they had other things, but that admired me. I mean, I had that brought in new respect for him
Yes.
because he just said that up front. Somebody says, well, what did you think about it? He said, we came here to find out if we got a church before I chose to be here.
I'm so glad.
And I said, okay, hallelujah, we can do that. So when we look at these things and realize where we are, Moses wanted to get the generation rest prepared to enter. And then, you know, how well do you and I know ourselves?
Pretty good.
Well, you know,
Not 100%.
you know, he asked us that question. You know, this is a test for the people to see how much they actually know about themselves. If I started asking you questions about yourself, you'd probably tell me to shut up. It's none of your business. All right? But you ask yourselves those questions.
Well, what is that saying?
Tell
that
everybody
there's-
nothing.
There's what you think you know,
Yeah.
what actually is, and what other people think they know
Well,
about you, right?
that's right. It's sort of like I'm not who I think I am.
Yeah.
I'm not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am. All right?
Something like that.
So you got to realize, and that's exactly what happens to us.
Yeah.
You know, and particularly for young people, you got to realize people were innocent as far as knowing their faith. I mean, they were neophytes,
Yeah.
and they were getting ready to walk in to all sorts of opportunities for sinning. You know, God is testing so that we can know why we respond the way we do. He's testing us today. That's what we're there for and thinking about. Well, you think along those lines. I got to thinking about all of his tests or lessons that he started throwing out at us. But, you know, I was like he said, the trainer had set up the test not so that we could know who we would respond, but for us to see how we would respond. In other words, they failed. That was a test set up, and they failed. He said we got a low mark, right? And so that's what happened. So see,
What should we use to judge whether we're doing what we're supposed to be doing?
That's
a deep question.
Well,
now.
it is,
Yeah.
because, you know, I mean, there's the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's doing what
Jesus wants us to do, but then you're open to interpretation about what
Well.
Jesus wants us to do sometimes, so that gets kind of hairy. And, there's just so many things. I often wonder, I'm trying to do right, but am I really doing right? Am I really doing what I'm supposed to be doing?
Good question. Said, when you are going through something hard and wonder where God is, remember the teacher is always quiet during the test. And that's why you and I have the question, am I doing the right thing, Lord? Is this the right answer? And that all you can do is respond, and if it works in that way, you think, oh, thank you, Lord. I realize I got it right after all. And so we do those kind of things. It's hard for us to know, it's hard for us to see people. At times, can we be absolutely open to the fact of saying, I love you and there's nothing you can do about it?
It's hard. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's hard. And it's like I put on the marquee out there. God loves you whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
All right? But the fact being is, I don't know, and I can't answer your question for you other than the fact of saying is, I have to just have prayer and say, okay, Lord, I turn it over to you and let things go from there. And thinking about it times, when I'm making that decision, I'm thinking, is this the right one? Sounds right, but is it? But you have to try it to see.
Well, I do believe there's evil, and sometimes I think I'm doing right, but then again I'm going, okay, am I listening to God or am I listening to Satan? I mean, who am I actually listening to
Been
here?
there.
Because he's a fooler. He will make you think you're doing right when you're not,
Absolutely.
and you'll feel good about it. And I'm thinking, Lord, have mercy.
And the interesting thing is, he does it in very unusual ways.
Yeah.
And I don't know
No.
Well, I think you do know because you were called to be a teacher. That is God.
That's God calling
you to be a teacher. So that part of your life, you were listening and you did what He wanted you to do. So now you're coming to Bible study, you're coming to church, you're meeting.
Well, this is one reason why I'm here. I'm trying,
Yeah.
because, I think I'm doing right.
I
Most of the time.
I
I mean,
think
every
so.
once in a while, I know I'm doing wrong.
Well, we all do that.
I'd love to hear a voice loud and clear.
Yeah, it'd
Yes,
be nice,
yeah.
wouldn't it? Hey, you.
I never hear it. It's
Or
always just a little
a thump you on the
whisper.
head like Gibbs did.
Yeah. Give me a whack on the head.
I know it.
Well, it says, in that first lesson he was talking about, you won't be able to fake it.
Right.
What was your thoughts there? When you think of that, you won't be able to fake it. In other words, he was saying, have you ever really been sure about doing something? You were just talking about you weren't. And it turned out to be the wrong plan or the wrong time. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Well, and then and you say, oh, okay. But the nice thing about it is God's quiet. God lets us make decisions. And if we screw it up, He has a marvelous way of making something good out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I was taking on the sermon last Sunday. Do we pray and thank God for the screw-ups in our lives or the things that occur in our lives? Because there's opportunities for us to grow from that.
Well, learn from your mistakes. That's another great
But
Yeah.
that's a great thing. But how many of us do learn from our mistakes?
Oh, I learned from several of them the hard
Depends
way.
on the mistakes.
Yeah, it depends on the
They
mistakes.
keep getting bit.
I learned that one though. I'm telling you, I looked at my dogs, they were grounded.
Well, I saw
Y'all
something-
kill each other,
I
I don't
saw-
care, I ain't getting involved.
I saw something on Facebook the other day, and it was about snakes. All right, it was a king snake
Yeah.
swallowing a copperhead,
Yeah.
and he says, "Please don't bother those yellow speckled king snakes because they are out for the evil ones." And I'm thinking, isn't that what God is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but king snakes will also kill each other.
Oh, I understand that. Now you're getting in too deep into the science side of it, you know.
I guess so.
We got one that's 5 foot long that lives right in our.
Well, I used to have one in the corn crib. All right, I remember having them because it would be in the barn and it'd be in the corn crib,
Yeah.
and I would be shucking corn, and my cousin would be there with me, and that king snake would crawl out. Well, John L. would leave. I mean, he would just bolt out of the crib. But you know, it was he was just looking, and he said, "Why didn't you run?" I said, "He was looking for something, and I wasn't it."
Yeah.
Or
No,
it
they
was
can't
like-
swallow
Yeah.
people.
So
We
when you
know
look at that, but here, you know, think about this part though. They were exiting Egypt. They had come across the wilderness for 40 years. They were well versed in all the things that Moses, and they knew he had killed. You remember Moses killed an Egyptian. All right, we all know that, and so we looked at it. But he's talking about that thing about it. But I love what he says. Moses wanted them to see that he was a man who had been tested. Mm-hmm. All right, had come to know more about himself, and that he was teachable. Are we teachable today?
We hope so. Yes.
That's why we come here, right? To become teachers. You know, and it was sort of like he was there looking at these questions, and I'm thinking about, you know, how do we do it? You know, think about that third question. Do you imagine? Was one of the hardest tests that Hebrew people experienced while in the desert? Can you imagine the desert for 40 years? Can you imagine it?
I don't want to be there.
Yeah, and that was it. And when you think about it, but see where they've come from. Now they're going into the promised land. They're getting ready to cross the Jordan River. They're getting ready to go to the land of milk and honey, because it was very, very profitable for producing crops and so forth. And so
I think their hardest test was probably trust.
That's what I put.
that's what he was.
Trust.
I think you're right. Trust is what they were saying, and what he wanted them to do is understand. You need to trust God in all of this, and it's hard for us because we have trouble. In other words, God is silent a lot. All right, He doesn't walk up and get our attention immediately, and so that's one of the things that we have to look at. And he knew that, you know, we must be consistent in what you're doing, and so that's what he was saying to them. If you have that, then you will stay consistent with it. You know, we conform to patterns of our lives because we love God, and we desire to bring honor to His name, and that's what we're about. And then I looked at that second lesson thing there, and thinking about it when we were, and I was wondering what your thoughts were, but God is quiet at times, right? And we're there.
He's not ready to answer.
Yeah. All right. And then how consistent are we?
Sometimes
Had a class.
consistency is a bad thing.
Well,
We can be consistent about some things that we don't need to be consistent about.
well, I
And
understand
we
that.
get stubborn, and
But-
then that comes back to bite us.
It's sort of like this. I had a high school buddy, and his father was a principal of our school, and the school was first through the 12th grade. And it was quite a large consolidated school. And Shelley's daddy was the principal. And we were talking one time, and we were talking about what would our parents think of this. And Shelley says, I know exactly what my father would say. He is consistent in making sure that I do the right thing. All right? In other words, and knowing his father as principal of the school, because I drove a school bus under his supervision, he was that way. Believe it or not, he lived to be over 100 years old.
Wow.
Anyway, he knew his father. He knew exactly what his father. We were being initiated, all right, and things happened, and we did stuff in initiations that we probably would never want to tell about. But I said something to it, and I said something to Shelley, and he said, "I know what my father would say about all this." He knew he was. That was where he was, and Mr. Bailey was that way, and so we think of it. What do you think of the Hebrew children, the hardest they were? They had to face once they were in the promised land. Think of what? What do you think is the hardest thing for them to deal with? He goes to lesson 3 there. He says, trust the process. Do you ever trust the process?
Hopefully.
Hopefully, okay. Hopefully trust it, all right. And when we deal here in thinking about this, you wonder, what is one principle of dating that you would be confident in sharing with others? I was surprised that he talked about the dating deal, about what his daughter was babysitting and the people were going to leave, but they were going to do things away from home that they wouldn't do at home. And I thought,
I didn't know where he was going exactly with that. I don't know.
Well, I was George did too. George said something about, where was he going? Well, what he was really saying is the parents weren't consistent.
Oh.
When he was telling his bride-to-be, who was babysitting and taking care of their family while he was gone, do you don't think the children were listening?
Well, probably.
And all of a sudden, if they're hearing Dad say, I don't drink at the house, but if I can go out here, I can have a drink.
That's so good.
But all of a sudden,
Not
that's
consistent.
inconsistent, isn't it? If you're going to have a drink, then do it at home as well. Let your children know what the limit is. All right, if you're going to have that, if you have a glass of wine, stop it. If you're going to have a shot of whiskey, stop it. In other words, put consistency there. But he was being inconsistent and saying, when we get out of here, we're going to go do what we want to do.
Well, see, to me, that sounded like really bad parenting. I mean, hiding stuff from your kids, and they're going to eventually find out. And then what are they going to think of you? Well, what else did you do?
Well, we've got a scenario in the city where a disastrous thing occurred, and the leader did not let everybody know about it, kept it hush hush. It reoccurred, and it's created chaos within that situation. So it was inconsistent in that sort of thing.
I wonder if that's a church my friend goes to.
I'm not going to get into that.
Well,
It may well be. It may well be.
I heard some things.
Yes, but trust the process. We have to learn, and that the kind of love God designed between a husband and wife is a deep, abiding, committing love. I love the word. Joy was reading, and she says, I never knew the word Ahab was a love of word. And I said, well, it's Hebrew. And there's 2 Hebrew words for love. The other one you have on the next page is hesed. And those are 2. But they have 2 different kinds of love when you think about it. They were, one of them, he tells you, is a kind of love, a human kind of love. The other one is a kind of love that grows and keeps everlasting covenants. You and I know the Greeks have a word for it, right? Well, the Hebrews only had 2 words for love, but the Greeks had like 5. And it depends on what you were looking at. You were looking at agape or koinonia or words like this that were love, and so we were there. But those are the things that we look at. How sustained is God's love? How sustained in God's love are you and I?
How sustained.
How sustained are you? Don't be Quakers now. There are no wrong answers in all of this. When you and I realize where we are in the midst of all this. One of the things that's important for us is to have the sustaining power of God in our lives. And that's where we get into having the faith. And that's where he was trying to get the generation rest ready to know that you're going to step into a new land. You're going to step into a new world. But you have God's sustaining love with you through it all. So whatever you do is stay connected to God. And that's what he's saying to us today. Stay connected. Questions? Thoughts? Well, next week we're going to do the last chapter in this. Actually, I'm going to try to pull 2 together. That in the closing part of it. And then we're going to take a break on that because Joy and I are going to be gone. And I'm talking to John about an issue on prayer, a study on prayer. And he will be here not this week, but next week. Say amen. By the way, for those of you thinking about Donna Hogan, she had her injections yesterday and was feeling better. First one, yes.
I just got a text from her.
Oh, did you? Sure.
That she said she wanted to share it with the choir, so I assumed she wouldn't mind sharing. It's a long one.
Yeah, that's what I have here. But go ahead. It's about the same one. No, go ahead and read that.
Good morning, Weeza. How are you? Doing well, I hope. I need to ask a big favor of you. Would you please use your choir group addresses to let everyone know that I got home yesterday afternoon about 4 o'clock from having my targeted injection procedure on my back. I think it's going to do me some good. I feel some better today, and I think from what I was told, the good feelings will increase over time. Things went well yesterday at hospital, and that hasn't changed since I got home. My hearing aids are broken, so I can hardly hear at all. After I get those hearing aids fixed Thursday at 3, I'll be glad to talk to you or anyone else, but for now, I hope this note will take place of conversation. Love to all.
When we went by there Sunday to deliver those flowers, which she loved.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, she
But
commented
she
here
was
for me.
having a lot of trouble hearing, and I
Yeah.
thought she just didn't have them in, but they're broken.
Broken, yeah.
Yeah, she said, I'm sitting here looking at the beautiful flowers that you brought by
Oh,
and wanting
wonderful.
to give thanks to everybody for sending them. So
I'm glad. That was nice.
the major thing is, here's one of the things I'm preaching on Sunday, is standing in the